April. Cambodia went to the polls in July, and strongman Hun Sen's ruling party emerged the victor, although he did not have enough seats to form a majority of his own. Opposition leaders began demanding an investigation into allegations of vote fraud, and the mass demonstrations that followed were frequently broken up by security forces. Last month, Hun Sen formed a coalition government with opposition leader Norodom Ranariddh. A one-time movie star was elected president of the Philippines, as one of the world's rowdiest democracies went to the polls in May. Joseph Estrada's first test as a leader came in November, when Manila accused China of building a naval support structure in the disputed Spratly Islands. However, the two countries managed to avert a crisis. Japan had its fair share of political turmoil as Prime Minister Ryutaro Hashimoto resigned in July after a humiliating electoral setback. The man chosen to succeed him was Keizo Obuchi, faced with two difficult jobs: cleaning up a banking system burdened by bad loans and engineering a recovery in an economy hit by the worst recession since the Second World War. In Russia, the increasingly erratic President Boris Yeltsin surprised the world in March by sacking his Prime Minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin, along with the entire cabinet, and naming young reformer Sergei Kirienko as premier. In August, Mr. Yeltsin sacked the cabinet again and renamed Mr. Chernomyrdin as Prime Minister. But he was forced to give up the idea amid vehement opposition by the Duma. In September, Yevgeny Primakov was approved as premier by the Duma. Demands for Mr. Yeltsin's resignation were stepped up in October. Thousands of protesters took to the streets, calling for an end to his 7-year rule and a return to the old Soviet era. Doubts about his ability to rule are growing stronger as his health continues to deteriorate. The 16-year rule of Germany's Chancellor Helmut Kohl was brought to an end when his Christian Democratic Alliance was beaten by Gerhard Schröder's Social Democratic Party. The issue that brought him down was mass unemployment. The threat of a major regional war in Central Africa remained strong this year after armed conflict broke out in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. At least 6 of the country's 9 neighbors were pulled into the conflict as President Laurent Kabila's forces fought for control against rebel troops. Despite a ceasefire announced by the United Nations in November, the fighting continued. 1998 was the year when nuclear ambitions on the Indian subcontinent were finally realized. India earned worldwide condemnation when it conducted 5 underground nuclear tests in May. The act was seen as both a political gimmick by a Hindu nationalist government leading a fragile coalition and a defiant assertion of might by a country living amid hostile neighbors. While patriotic Indians celebrated the event, the United States immediately announced sanctions and Japan suspended aid. Despite an international effort to restrain Pakistan, India's Islamic neighbor retaliated later the same month. Pakistan conducted 6 tests. The initial threat of a nuclear conflict between the two countries died down as they settled down to continue an ongoing border war in Kashmir. The fundamental question that came to light over the controversy was an age-old one. Why should one nation have the right to hold nuclear weapons over another? 1998 was not spared from disasters. Aviation took off to a bad start in February when a China Airlines Airbus traveling from Bali to Taipei crashed at Taipei's international airport. All 203 people on board died. The same month, a low-flying American military plane crashed into cable car wires at an Italian ski resort. The cable car plunged 200 meters, killing 20 people. Charges were filed in March against the 4 American pilots involved in the crash. In September, a Swiss airplane en route from New York to Geneva crashed into the sea off the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada. The plane had been trying to make an emergency landing. All 229 passengers and crew were killed. Relatives of the victims spent weeks waiting to recover the bodies of their loved ones. In June, 100 people were killed when an intercity express train derailed in northern Germany. Halloween celebrations turned into a nightmare for young revelers in Sweden when a fire swept through an overcrowded disco in October. 63 young people died and almost 200 were injured. Earlier the same month, it was a tragedy brought about by poverty in Nigeria when an oil pipeline exploded into flames in the south of the country. More than 700 people died in the inferno, which took days to be put out. The victims had been scavenging for petrol from the burst pipeline. In Southeast Asia, the hazardous smog of 1997 threatened many areas for the second year running because of forest fires. In Indonesia's East Kalimantan, about 280,000 hectares of land was destroyed in the first few months of the year, causing estimated losses of $635 million. The year ended with another major aviation disaster when a Thai Airways plane crashed in southern Thailand. The plane plunged into a swamp while making a third attempt to land at Surat Thani Airport during a tropical storm. 101 people on board were killed, although 45 people survived miraculously. Natural disasters also took their toll on human lives this year, some descending with a ferocity that was difficult to bear. The most destructive hurricane in more than 200 years swept through Central America in November. The week-long rampage of Hurricane Mitch left a trail of devastation, with Honduras and Nicaragua bearing the brunt. At least 11,000 people were killed. At least 3,000 people were killed in China as floods surged along the Yangtze River in July and August. Floodwaters inundated more than 21 million hectares of land and caused economic losses amounting to more than $20 billion. In July again, 3 tidal waves caused by an undersea earthquake swept away entire villages in northwest Papua New Guinea. About 2,000 people were killed. The extent of human misery caused by the disaster was beyond description. Devastating mudslides caused by torrential rain killed at least 150 people in southern Italy in May. 2 separate earthquakes hit northern Afghanistan within a 4-month period. The first in February left more than 4,000 dead, and thousands more perished in June when villages in the region were reduced to rubble. In sports, it was a mixed year with off-the-field activities threatening to overshadow the action itself. The threat of hooliganism and disputes over ticket allocation dominated the news ahead of the Soccer World Cup in France. However, once the action got underway, it was a case of Vive la France, as the host nation beat hot favorites Brazil to lift the title for the first time. Star French striker Zinedine Zidane is in the running for Player of the Year, along with Brazil's Ronaldo. However, Ronaldo dominated World Cup post-mortem for his personal underachievement, particularly during the final. Still in France, and the country's prestigious cycling race, the Tour de France, was thrown into chaos as a drug scandal turned the race into a farce, with a number of top riders being expelled from the prestigious race. Eventually, Italian Marco the Pirate Pantani emerged a worthy winner, but the sport is still reeling from the consequences of the drug scandal. In the United States, the Major League Baseball season burst into life with the emergence of Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa going head-to-head for the home run record. Sosa ended the season with 66 homers for the Chicago Cubs, but it was the St. Louis Cardinals slugger McGwire who emerged victorious. He belted 70 homers to eclipse Roger Maris's 37-year-old mark of 61, while Sosa was named National League MVP. And speaking of records, Pete Sampras rewrote tennis history by becoming the first player to end the year at #1 for the 6th year in a row. The Chicago Bulls dominated the NBA yet again, beating Utah in the playoff finals to win the title for the 5th time in 7 years, with Michael Jordan maintaining his superstar status. And that was the last NBA game played in 1998, as an ugly wrangle between players and managers drags on into the new year. The topic of disagreement? You guessed it. Money. And a record number of Hong Kong athletes returned from the Asian Games in Thailand, better off for their efforts. The SAR comfortably overhauled its previous Asian Games best medal haul of 12. Gold medalists included board sailor Li Lai Shan, wushu exponent Ng Siu Ching, ten-pin bowler Sunny Hui, and the snooker team, as the territory achieved a new level of sporting success in the region. A new era of space exploration was ushered in last month with the launching of the first module of the International Space Station from a cosmodrome in the former Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan. An international joint venture, the space station will be the most expensive home man has ever built. Its total cost is eventually expected to reach $100 billion. When completed in the year 2004, the station will be a launching pad to the stars. And that was our World Review of 1998. In the quest for lasting peace and prosperity, the world hasn't had much success this year. But the efforts to achieve this have left one legacy, that of hope, as we usher in the new year and approach the millennium. Here's wishing you a very happy new year.
Last season, the Cleveland Indians won the national championship. This season, the unruly players are back, and the Indians have a new owner. Can they do it again, or was it just luck? Major League 2. Tonight's Bilingual 930.
Empowering and inspiring. I love that.
This will teach you to steal my father's...
A new vision.
Happy Ever After. New Year's Eve at 8 o'clock on ATV World.
This is a universal issue.
Makes you feel vibrant, makes you feel alive.
Viagra, a curse or a cure? Explore the pros and cons of this new wonder drug and redefine male impotence for the new era. In the world of discovery, Viagra, Real Revolution. Friday night at 10 o'clock on ATV World. Now on ATV World, we continue our look at what's happened in this year. Hong Kong 1998, Riding the Storm.
Good evening, welcome to Riding the Storm, ATV World's look back at the events which shaped Hong Kong in 1998.
1998 has indeed been a tumultuous year for the SAR, a year in which the headlines were dominated by the economy, and the government intervention into the stock and futures market must be considered the most hotly debated financial story of the year. For months in the first part of 1998, there were plenty of speculative activities in the currency markets for Hong Kong dollars, leading also to volatile changes in the futures and stock markets. The Hong Kong government decided to step in, and from August 14th until the last trading day of that month, the Monetary Authority poured a staggering $100 billion, estimated to be 15% of the territory's reserves, into the markets. The move left trading volume records in tatters, and the government ended up becoming one of the largest shareholders of Hong Kong's top companies. Many in Hong Kong and abroad were critical of the move, saying the government should not have become a player and ruining the territory's free market image. Top officials toured the world to explain their position, and Monetary Chief Joseph Yam eventually unveiled a package to tighten control of the securities and futures markets. Even without the mid-year turmoil, the local economy was in a slump thanks to the regional financial crisis. One of the first casualties was the CA Pacific Group. More than 3,000 investors with accounts at the bankrupt brokerage protested on various occasions, hoping the government would compensate them. Several other similar firms also ran into trouble. Eventually, about 70% of CA Pacific's clients were promised compensation worth more than $400 million. Clients of other collapsed firms will be similarly compensated. Don Wu-Zhang, the financial secretary, had predicted economic growth, but had to back down quickly when first quarter figures showed -2% GDP growth. The government then came up with a 7-point plan to boost the economy, ranging from relaxation of anti-speculative measures on flat sales to the construction of a cable car project for the Big Buddha on Lantau. Less than a month later, the authorities announced another rescue bid, the most spectacular being the suspension of land sales for at least a year. The Home Starter loan scheme was to be expanded, as was a plan for small and medium-sized businesses. And to show that the government is leading by example, more than 300 directorate-grade officials would face pay freezes. But no land sales also means drastically lowered income for the government coffers. The budget deficit this financial year is expected to top $40 billion. While the government is in the red, the GDP is also on the slide. There was a record-shattering minus 7% growth when the third quarter results were compared to the same period last year. All that meant the job situation was bound to deteriorate. Everything from the highest-profile airline to the telecommunications giant were cutting staff or slashing salaries or bonuses. Familiar department stores, cake shop and video chains could not survive the economic downturn and disappeared from Hong Kong's high streets. In June, the government brought in a plan to create 100,000 new jobs, but critics say they come only from infrastructure projects already approved. In any event, more and more lost their jobs. Like many other negative statistics, new records for unemployment rate kept appearing towards the end of the year. Officially 5.5%, or 188,000 people are unemployed. Unions say the true figures are 2 or 3 times more. The closing of the shops created another problem. Cake and video coupon holders were left with pieces of worthless paper, once cost them millions of dollars. Many staring at a bleak future without jobs may be carrying massive mortgage payments, and they try to get out of real estate deals which are no longer profitable, or in some cases, serious money losers. There were demonstrations outside developers' offices as the potential buyers want to get out of unbuilt flats they could no longer afford. But developers were adamant the buyers should honor their contracts. Tycoon Li Ka-shing implied the dispute was one of the reasons why he scrapped a $10 billion project in Hong Kong. Throughout the year, every government rescue plan would bring mini revivals in the property market. Towards the end of the year, the announcement of the loan curbs eased from 70 to 85% was a major boost, as were the 4 cuts, some unexpected, which brought the interest rate down by a full percentage point. The downturn, however, could not mask Hong Kong people's speculative mentality. Long lines appeared in front of a certain fast food store when it decided to give out a set of plastic Snoopies, one for each day of the month. The full set fetched more than $1,000 at one point. Just perfect for those who didn't want to eat or throw away too many hamburgers.
In a year overshadowed by the economy, the SAR held its first Legislative Council elections. Pro-democracy forces won most of the directly elected seats, but were denied an overall majority. The results and the record turnout rate prompted calls for faster democratization, but the government rejected them. Instead, 1998 will also be remembered as the beginning of the end for Hong Kong's 2 elected municipal councils.
All you have to do is to put a tick against a ticket, and that's all that is required.
That was the message as voters were confronted with wholesale changes to the 1995 polls. The first-past-the-post system for the 20 geographical constituencies was replaced by lists of candidates returned by proportional representation. Last Governor Chris Patton's 10 new functional constituencies were scrapped. Instead of giving each working person a second vote, organisations and corporations chose 30 representatives. The remaining 10 lawmakers were selected by the 800-strong election committee. Its members included provisional legislators and Hong Kong representatives in China's parliament and top advisory body. A record 2.8 million people registered as voters. But analysts predicted a low turnout, pointing to complicated electoral methods. 5 were used overall, and voter disillusionment with electoral arrangements. Instead, on May the 24th, voters overcame a red thunderstorm warning and even floods to mark their ballots. The turnout rate hit a record 53%, with nearly 1.5 million casting their votes. The results brought joy and disappointment.
I played all my cards, and that's what you've done too. Nothing more to say.
There were famous defeats for veteran party leaders Alan Lee and Frederick Fung.
The winner takes it all. The loser is standing small.
Jim Pui Chung held onto his seat, only to be ousted a few months later after being convicted of forging documents. On the night, pro-democracy candidates won 17 of the 60 seats, 14 of them geographicals, but were denied a majority as pro-business and Conservative candidates dominated the functional constituencies and election committee.
Hong Kong people want democracy, and they want it now.
The administration was having none of it.
There is a timetable laid down in the basic law. I do not believe there is a consensus within the community as to how fast this pace should move.
Instead of advancing democracy, the government took what some considered a step backward. 2 tiers of elected government will be scrapped when the municipal councils are abolished next year. Their duties will be shared between a new Department of Food and Environmental Hygiene and expanded district boards. The government's bill for the new district councils consolidates the reintroduction of appointed seats. A fifth of the 519 councillors will be hand-picked. Local government reform was perhaps the most controversial aspect of a policy speech many saw as lacking in ideas. Legislators went so far as to vote down a motion of thanks for Mr. Tung's address, further straining the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Mr. Tung's popularity rating also suffered, dropping to an all-time low. And while the leaders in Beijing heaped praise on the chief executive, his administration planned a public relations overhaul. Stephen Lam was named as information coordinator. But with the $180,000 a month post already attracting bad publicity, it remains to be seen whether Mr. Lam will be able to turn around the SAR government's image when he takes up the job next year.
Stephen Lam's services were desperately needed earlier this year for the opening of the new airport. Chek-lap Kok was supposed to lead Hong Kong into the future with added capacity and new technology. But its early days only brought chaos and confusion. Hong Kong bid farewell to Kai Tak Airport and turned out the lights at 1 a.m. on July 6th. Later that day, Chek-lap Kok Airport welcomed the first commercial flight, Cathay Flight 889, from New York. But what was touted as a huge state-of-the-art airport, which would boost Hong Kong's efficiency in travel and cargo, turned out to be just the opposite. Most expected teething problems, but no one was prepared for the chaos that ensued from the beginning. Travelers experienced severe delays.
I've been, they were supposed to arrive at 12:20 and look at the time, 4:20, and now I pick them up.
Canceled flights and lost luggage left passengers stranded, and information systems and telephones malfunctioned. But one of the greatest disasters was caused by a failing computer system at Hong Kong Air Cargo Terminal Limited, or HACTL. Millions of dollars were lost by Hong Kong shippers whose cargo had been tied up in the seemingly endless queue of cargo trucks. Importers and exporters of seafood were hit especially hard, with much of their decomposing cargo stuck at Chek-lap Kok, creating a stench of rot that filled the terminal. Cargo handlers scrambled for alternatives. The old cargo terminal at Kai Tak was reopened. Even the Shenzhen International Airport was used, despite the extra time needed by shippers to get their cargo out. It wasn't until August that HACTL resumed 100% normal service, but drivers still complained of delays. Angered by the damage to the economy and Hong Kong's reputation, the public and legislators sought the people responsible for the mess. 2 separate inquiries were established to investigate the new airport. One run by the Legislative Council, the other a commission led by Justice Wu Guokheng. Both panels fired questions at senior members of the government and the airport authority, trying to get to the source of the problem. Despite the controversy, Hank Townsend finished his term as chief executive and left some positive parting words.
You've got a great airport, guys. Enjoy it.
Although the LegCo inquiry continues, the Wu Commission recently released its initial findings. In its outline of possible allegations, the commission pointed the finger at former Airport Authority Chief Executive Hank Townsend. The commission says Dr. Townsend should be held personally responsible for falsehoods made to the government, saying computer systems and the airport were ready for use. But government officials, including Anson Chan, escaped the blame. While Hong Kong's more than $120 billion airport has overcome most of its huge teething problems, many growing pains remain. The opening of the second runway, which would expand the airport's capacity, was delayed until October, then the end of the year. Now it won't be ready for use until the second half of 1999. The airport authority plans to install a backup communication system due to interference from paging signals, so it could be some time before Chek-lap Kok reaches its full efficient potential.
Starting January 1999, ATV World takes you on a journey into the sky. It's the Wings of Tomorrow. Preview the fastest and most advanced military aircraft. Then see the advantages of helicopters on the battlefield. Don't miss the direction taken by aerial reconnaissance, private travel, and the future of space travel. Enter the future, world of discovery, and fly with Wings of Tomorrow. Our first stop, Air Dominance. This Friday night at 9 o'clock on ATV World.
Epson's unique invisible 6 picoliter ultra micro dot printing brings images alive. The new Epson Stylus Photo 750 inkjet printer.
It's a blue energy breakthrough. The new unleaded choice from Shell, Formula V-Power. Its Vaporon energy boosters enhance fuel combustion, unleashing extra power. Amaze yourself. Feel the surge of new Shell V-Power.
You thought Sunday users in the MTR were nuts. Sunday has the MTR covered.
The completion of the new airport turns the spotlight on another phase of our infrastructure development, costing over $235 billion in the next 5 years. New railways, roads, container terminal, land and building projects that will enhance Hong Kong's competitiveness, improve the quality of life, and provide more jobs. Hong Kong, advancing into the new millennium.
It's wild. It's exciting. But is it skill or luck? Starting January 1999, every Monday to Friday night at 6:30 p.m. Spin the Wheel of Fortune and see for yourself. ATV World. We dare to be different.
Welcome back as we continue with our review. It has not been a healthy year for Hong Kong. The territory reeled from the effects of bird flu, red tide, and medical blunders, which claimed many lives. The deadly virus H5N1 did not pose a health threat until last year, when it suddenly made the jump from animals to humans. 18 people came down with a deadly bird flu, 6 of whom later died. In a bid to stop the virus spreading, 1.6 million chickens were slaughtered in December last year. It wasn't until more than 2 months later that the resumption of chicken imports was given the green light. No new cases of H5N1 have been reported since new licensing conditions were imposed on the importation of chickens. Another health scare in the shape of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, the human form of mad cow disease, or CJD, hit Hong Kong in the first 6 months of the year. 7 people died in January after at least 108 patients were injected with a medical reagent contaminated by the protein which causes CJD. The reagent was used in tests on heart and lung patients, but according to the hospital authority, the deaths were not related to CJD. Several months later, plasma given in 1994 by a donor who died of CJD was found. This prompted experts to call for self-sufficiency in blood products to avoid another health scare. In March, the worst red tide to hit the territory decimated $70 million worth of fish. The microorganisms absorb the oxygen from the water and release toxic substances, which suffocate and poison fish. Although little is known about where the algae came from, experts say Hong Kong's environment must have encouraged its rapid growth. Swimming pools were no safe grounds either. 10% of the 71 suspected and confirmed enterovirus cases had gone to swimming pools before they were infected. 60 cases were confirmed, but no one died. Medical blunders also raised concerns. In August, 3 patients died after contaminated water was used during routine kidney dialysis treatment at the Hong Kong sanatorium. 3 patients survived. The contamination was traced to detergents or sterilizers used to clean the dialysis machine. A 3-member task force was appointed by the hospital to investigate the blunder and avoid a repeat of the tragedy. In November, a tragedy of a different nature forced the government to rethink the ordinance covering human organ transplants. Terminal patient Chow Yam-fan died after he was refused by the board to allow a liver transplant because he could not give his consent. The patient was unable to give his consent because he was comatose, a fact that forced the government to propose amending the ordinance to allow transplant surgery in cases where the recipient is incapable of grasping the situation. The consequences from the health scares and medical blunders Hong Kong faced this year were costly, but it's hoped the lessons learned will stand the territory in good stead in the years to come.
1998 saw a slight drop in the total number of crimes reported. More than 62,000 incidents were reported in the first 11 months of this year, compared with more than 67,000 last year. Headlines were dominated by the execution of crime boss Zhang Zikang, the attack on talk show host Albert Zhang, and the Telford Garden murders. A record seizure of pirated compact discs in Hong Kong led to the arrest of a top customs officer. 49-year-old Wong Pui Sum was head of Customs Department's Prosecution Intelligence and Investigation Bureau. He's been suspended from his post after being charged with accepting a $50,000 bribe. About 800 pirated CDs worth $300 million were seized in the April operation. Well-known commentator Albert Zhang was severely wounded during an early morning chopper attack inside the commercial radio compound in August. The talk show host was stabbed in the back, arm, and leg by 2 unknown men. Police believe the attack was the result of some comments Mr. Zhang made on air, but no suspects have yet been arrested. A $4 million reward leading to the attacker's arrest remains unclaimed. Meanwhile, Mr. Zhang has yet to return to his show full-time. Doctors say he has a 60% chance of regaining full use of his limbs. A 36-year-old woman suffering from a mental disorder has admitted to killing a 4-year-old girl left under her care. The girl's bruised body was found lying among bushes near a Tin Shui Wai public housing estate. Nearly a month earlier, the body of a 6-year-old boy was found stuffed inside a nylon bag in Changsha Wan. A 47-year-old man was arrested for the killing. The man also suffers from a psychological disorder. The territory was shocked when 5 bodies were found inside a Telford Garden flat. Chinese police later arrested a man in the mainland. The suspect allegedly posed as a feng shui master and stole about $1 million from the 3 women who died. 2 daughters of the victims were also killed. Crime boss Zhang Zikang was arrested and tried in Guangzhou for arms smuggling and the kidnapping of 2 Hong Kong tycoons. He was convicted and executed for the crimes, but his case sparked a controversy. Some say that the SAR government effectively gave up its judicial independence by allowing the case to be tried in the mainland, but local officials rejected the claim, saying Zhang committed cross-border crimes. They also said local authorities could not take up the case as Zhang's alleged victims, notably the 2 tycoons he kidnapped, did not file a complaint. But in an apparent bid to prevent a repeat of the incident, Hong Kong and mainland authorities have begun talks on the extradition of fugitives. The government says it hopes an agreement can be reached as soon as possible. Scams involving top athletes made the headlines this year. In November, 5 national football team players were arrested on charges of accepting bribe in exchange for throwing up matches, including the World Cup qualifying game. They were released on bail of $30,000 each. And earlier this month, 13 people, including 11 jockeys, were arrested by the ICAC over alleged race fixing. It's believed the group rid 2 matches in March and April of 1996 in exchange for a $2 million bribe. One of the jockeys arrested, Kwok Ting, pleaded guilty to 2 bribery charges and was jailed for 6 months.
Turning to the mainland now, it's been a big year on the diplomatic front for China, the high point being the first tour by an American president since the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown. The visit boosted Jiang Zemin's leadership, along with another decision by Beijing, its pledge not to devalue the yuan in the midst of the regional economic turmoil. That was despite the most devastating floods to hit the country in half a century. As Rahina De Luna reports, China ushered in 1998 with a major leadership reshuffle.
The 9th session of the National People's Congress saw the official promotion of economic czar Zhu Rongji to the post of premier. His predecessor Li Peng took over the chairmanship of the National People's Congress from Qiao Shi, who retired. Rising star Hu Jintao was promoted to vice president. In April, 29-year-old dissident Wang Dan checked into a Detroit hospital in the United States, a free man. The former student leader, who'd been serving an 11-year jail term for subversion, was released on medical parole. 2 months later, American President Bill Clinton was officially welcomed in Tiananmen Square. He was the first American leader to enter the square since the 1989 student crackdown. For that controversial concession, Mr. Clinton was allowed to hold a town meeting with students of Beijing University, where the president was grilled on American policy on Taiwan and on whether it harbors plans to contain China. But China was treated to an even rarer spectacle as the 2 leaders debated sensitive issues, including the use of force on student protesters on Tiananmen Square, live on state television.
I believe, and the American people believe, that the use of force and the tragic loss of life was wrong.
89年的那场风波，如果中国不采取坚决的措施，是不可能今天有这样一个稳定的局面。
While the visit signaled a new warming in Sino-American ties, the first ever visit by a Chinese president to Japan later in the year was not as smooth. A last-minute meeting on the eve of Jiang Zemin's arrival failed to seal what China most wanted, a formal apology from Japan for attacking the mainland in the 30s. In the end, the 2 leaders did not sign a joint communique. Undeterred, Jiang Zemin continued hammering his message, including at a keynote speech at the prestigious Waseda University. But some right-wing activists loudly disagreed with the visiting leader. Jiang Zemin's trip to Japan was pushed back by the most devastating floods to hit central and northern China in half a century. The long summer months were spent fighting encroaching floodwaters along the mighty Yangtze. The official death toll from this year's floods, 3,656, and total damage is estimated at more than 6 billion yuan. Another landmark visit of the year was made by Taiwan's top mainland envoy Ku Chen-fu to the mainland to resume top cross-strait talks stalled for 3 years. His meeting with Jiang Zemin was the highest level contact between the 2 rival powers in nearly 50 years. While no major breakthrough was made, cross-strait talks look set to continue, boosted by the defeat of incumbent Taipei Mayor Chen Shui-bian of the pro-independence DPP party in a key mayoral election. He was beaten by former Justice Minister Ma Ying-jeou in what's widely seen as a huge win for the ruling Kuomintang and a vote for the status quo in cross-strait relations.
Liu Nanchun became the latest dissident to be freed on medical parole. But China continued a crackdown on dissent. Leading activists in the fledgling opposition China Democracy Party were given stiff sentences for subverting state power. Xu Wenli was given 13 years, Party founder Wang Youcai, 11 years, and his associate Tin Yung-min, 12 years, sparking a series of hunger strikes by dissidents across the country. Well, that concludes our review of Hong Kong and China in 1998. Thanks for watching, and from all of us at ATV News, have a very happy New Year.